set. Okay, we can get started. For the few of you that don't know me, I'm Charlie Gwelly. I'm with the Mattituck-Laurel Civic Association. And tonight, I think this is a really important session, and I'm really happy to see all of you come. Thank you. And I know we all love the North Fork for a variety of reasons, but one thing that strikes me repeatedly is that the town government wants to hear from the community when it sets policies about things like zoning. And I think that doesn't happen in too many other places. So thank you very much. Without any further ado, Heather Lanza, the Director of the Planning Department, and Mark Terry, the Assistant Director of the Planning Department, will run the rest of the meeting.
Thanks, Charles. Thanks a lot. Well, welcome everyone. Before I get started, I just want to acknowledge we have our supervisor, Al Krupski's here. We also have two town council members, Brian Mealy and Ann Smith, and also Greenport Village Mayor Kevin Stussy is here. And just to mention that also the mayor is also a member of our zoning update advisory committee. So he's very active in this project. Planning staff, we also have Caitlin Westerman here. She's helping out. And if I missed anyone, I'm sorry.
Town assessor.
Oh, thank you. I haven't even met you yet. So the purpose of this meeting is for you to learn more about our town zoning update project, but also for us to learn more about what issues that can be addressed by zoning are top of mind for you. What do you think we should be focusing on? I haven't done this in a while, so excuse me if I'm rusty. So we're going to start with some basics of zoning, how that relates to our town comp plan, and then an overview of our zoning update project. I'll talk for about 20-25 minutes, so if it's boring, it won't be long. Then we'll break out into groups for about 20 minutes for discussion, and then we'll have a little fun with stickers. So I'm going to start with the basics of zoning. I'm sure many of you already understand zoning, but for those who might not know, generally zoning is a set of laws that control the physical development of land and the use of property. Zoning regulates what uses are allowed on a property, where and to what extent those uses are allowed, and how the property can be developed. Local governments like Southold Town create the zoning laws with two elements: a text that describes the laws and a map that shows where those laws will be applied. The purposes of zoning are to promote safety, public health, and welfare of the community. It's used to try and provide compatibility between existing and new developments. And in Southold especially, zoning can help ensure zoning is zoning's also the main tool to implement land use policies and control how and where growth occurs. So just a quick example of how zoning works. This is an illustration of a neighborhood with single-family homes. So if a developer comes and proposes a 5-story building here, zoning regulations can prevent this by limiting the height of buildings. And in Southold Town, zoning limits the height of all buildings to 35 feet. So you couldn't get a 5-story building anywhere in Southold right now. Some common zoning terms, we have setbacks, you may have heard, bulk schedule, variance. Setbacks are the distance a building needs to be from the property line, and different zoning districts have different setback requirements. The bulk schedules are important. They're tables with the zoning districts across the top and the dimensional requirements down the side. They provide dimensions like those setback distances, minimum lot size, the percent of land a building can cover, and the maximum building height, among others. There are many others. In this example, this is right from our town code. This is right from our town code. It says front yard here, and if you look across at the different zoning districts, you'll see One zoning district says the building has to be 60 feet back, another says 50 feet, and another says 35. So they're different for each zoning district, depending on what type it is. A variance is a waiver from the zoning rules that you as a property owner can request. The Southold Town Zoning Board of Appeals, otherwise known as the ZBA, has the authority to review and grant those variances. A common example would be someone wants to put addition on their house, and it creates a situation where now they're too close to the property line. So someone can go to the ZBA and ask for relief from that requirement, and the zoning board will review that and decide whether it's warranted. So now we're going to talk a little bit about Southold Town zoning in particular. Southold Town has 19 different zoning districts. They can be loosely categorized as residential or non-residential. Every property has a zoning designation, and each of those 19 districts has allowed uses and dimensional requirements. The other important part of zoning is where those rules apply, and this is shown on the zoning map. And the zoning map sets the boundaries for all the zoning districts, so you can see the zoning district for each property. Can you guys see over there? No? Okay. So around the room, we put two big maps that you'll get a chance to look at later. The complete area of Mattituck-Laurel is on one, and then the other one sort of zooms in on the hamlet center of Mattituck. The entire town zoning map and the town code, you can see that right online on the town website if you're interested. But here on the slide, we just did a close-up of the zoning in and around Mattituck's hamlet center, because that has a lot of examples of different zones. The blue color in the center, labeled HB, is the hamlet business zoning, and that goes right around Pike Street, Love Lane, and Route 25 and Sound Avenue. That's the main town zoning district. The red color with the LI label is light industrial. It's typically near railroad tracks, and you can see the railroad track line runs right between the red and the blue. The purple is the B zone, general business zone, down the bottom there. That's typically on the outskirts of the hamlet centers. And then the light yellow and the pale orange are residential zones. So each zoning district has a list of uses that are allowed. These lists are split into three categories: permitted uses, special exception uses, and accessory uses. So permitted uses are those that are allowed on the property. They're often called as of right because landowners expect they have a right to use their property for any use on that list. We'll look at a couple permitted uses in a couple different districts. First, we'll look at the residential 80 zoning district. Just so you know, the 80 refers to the minimum parcel size in that district. It's short for 80,000 square feet, roughly 2 acres. Some of the permitted uses allowed in this zoning district are single-family homes. You have agriculture, wineries, and also small wind energy systems. But those can only go on larger parcels. Next, we'll look at the Hamlet Business District. These districts are found in the hamlet centers or the downtowns. Some of the permitted uses there, of course, are much more expansive than in the residential districts, and that's where retail stores would be, restaurants, banks, train stations, and libraries are just some of the permitted uses. Next, we're going to look at special exception uses, the second major category. These are uses that are allowed but are subject to more conditions than the permitted uses. The conditions are intended to assure that the use is in harmony with the community and won't adversely affect the neighborhood. So in Southold, all the uses that fall under the special exception category have to meet a list of standards and conditions in the code. On this slide, the summary of the list of something called the general standards, and they are very general. I did give you all a handout, and if you didn't get it, we have more for you, that has all of these in great detail. They're also in the town code online. But they include broad statements like the use will not prevent the orderly and reasonable use of adjacent properties, or that it'll be in harmony with and promote the general purposes and intent of town zoning. So they're really very broad. The next section of standards for special exceptions are called matters to be considered, and there are 16 of these. The first 8 are on this slide. I'm not going to read them all again, they're in your handout, but they include things like reviewing the effect of the proposed use on property values, traffic congestion, parking, and overcrowding. And here are the other 8. They include a consideration for how close to a church or school the proposed use will be, and whether there's space for buffers and screening. And again, they're all available online or in the handout. Just some examples of things that require special exception approval. Here's the resort residential zoning district. This is located on properties like, you might know, like the Southold Inn or the Eastern Long Island Campground. And the special uses in this district include things like marinas, yacht clubs, hotels or motels, 2-family dwellings, and the like. In the general business district, there are a long list of special exception uses. Like I said, these are typically located on the outskirts of the hamlet centers, and they include funeral homes, takeout restaurants, large retail stores, wineries, hotels and motels, laundromats, bars, car washes, gas stations. You know, it's a district that has a lot of uses and more intense uses than other zones. And the third of the 3 types of uses is accessory use. Those are uses that are incidental and connected to a permitted use. And an example would be a swimming pool. A swimming pool is considered an accessory use to a house. So there's, in addition to those lists of uses and the bulk schedule and the conditions and special exception, there's a lot of other regulations and in the zoning that control development. So for non-residential development, like a new business or commercial building, the additional requirements include things like site plan review by the planning board. This involves scrutiny of the details of the project. The purpose is to ensure the site will be functional and safe and in character with the community. The planning board looks at things like the driveway locations, a safe distance from the nearest intersection, there's enough parking on site, the type of landscaping meets the code, or the amount, buffers to screen neighbors, and also they get recommendations on the appearance of the building from our architectural review committee. Larger developments receive extra scrutiny through the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act. That's also known as SECRA, if you've ever heard that acronym. SECRA requires the planning board to review projects through the lens of its impacts to the environment. And then there's a couple other levels. If a project's located within 100 feet of wetlands or the shoreline, our Southold town trustees have to review it, and they are a separate board that has jurisdiction over those wetlands. A little bit about the development review process. Zoning in action, basically for non-residential projects, the first step is people apply to our building department. The building department reviews it and looks at whether or not it needs site plan review, or does it need zoning board of appeals special exception review. Then the applicant has to complete those reviews from the planning board or the zoning board or both before they can receive their building permit to start their construction. Many of the larger projects that need both planning board and zoning board run their applications at the same time. And I'll get a little bit more into that process really quickly. So a general overview of the steps followed by the planning board and the zoning board. When they review an application, this is for non-residential development, first they submit their application to the planning or zoning board, then they schedule a public hearing. Public hearings are really important because they give a chance for the concerns of neighbors to be considered by these boards. And when a project needs both the special exception from ZBA and site plan from planning board, then there's going to be 2 public hearings, one with planning board, one with ZBA. After the hearings, the comments are compiled and reviewed by each board. The comments include the public hearing testimony, but also the planning board looks at comments from other agencies like the fire departments. The next step might be a requirement for revisions to the plan based on those comments, and the last step is a decision by a vote of one of the boards, and they make those at public meetings. You can actually keep up on what each board is reviewing by signing up on the town website to be notified about their upcoming agendas. So that's a nice option if you're interested. Going on to the residential side, when someone wants to build a house on an existing lot, they don't need any public hearings. They just need to apply for a building permit. But if the new house doesn't meet the code in some way, it would have a public hearing if they need a variance from the zoning board. And also they would need trustees review with a public hearing if they're close to wetlands in the shore and they're in that jurisdiction. Now, if someone wants to subdivide their land, they want to create more lots because they have a bigger piece of land, they would have to make an application for a subdivision to the planning board. And there are a lot of regulations and rules around subdividing land. Most of those are in chapter 240, which are not under consideration in the zoning project. But the main place that zoning code affects subdivisions is that bulk schedule we talked about, because that gives you the minimum amount of land required for each lot in each zoning district, which in turn controls the total number of lots that any piece of land could be created and turned into. That's the zoning part. Does anybody have questions about the zoning, basic zoning information? That's good. So the next, very short, I wanted to talk about the comprehensive plan and zoning, because they're closely linked. New York State says that a town's zoning must be consistent with and support the goals of the comprehensive plan. And our Southold Town Comprehensive Plan, adopted in 2020, includes the goals for our community's future. So this project, to update the town zoning, is basically being done to implement many of the goals in our comprehensive plan. The overall vision statement of the comprehensive plan is a good place to start. I'm not going to read the whole thing. This is just a portion of it up on the screen. But it states that the work we're doing has to be compatible with existing community character, got to support land preservation, maintain a vibrant local economy, create efficient transportation, promote diverse housing stock. I know we've done a lot of talking about that lately. Expanding recreational opportunities and protecting natural resources. So essentially, our vision for Southold Town is one of balancing growth and development with community character in our environment. And that's the ideal. And there's a planning term for this concept. It's basically called smart growth. So wondering if you're wondering what goals in our comprehensive plan can be implemented by zoning changes, the plan has a lot of goals that relate to zoning regulations or that can be implemented, at least in part, by our zoning. The most direct goal is in chapter 3, our land use chapter. It explicitly calls for this zoning update we're talking about. And there are several recommendations under this chapter. For instance, it has specific recommendations for updating our zoning in the hamlet centers and on the outskirts of business districts where they transition to residential districts. Another example would be in our housing chapter. There's a goal to create more community housing. And for those people who can't afford the current market rate of homes. And zoning could help achieve that by finding ways to make it easier for people to create more housing, community housing, diverse types of housing. We have a natural resources chapter, and that is a goal to protect our drinking water. And the recommendation in there is an aquifer protection overlay district. this is a zoning district that would help regulate how water is used. And I think Southampton has one, and some other towns have these. Other goals don't necessarily mention zoning directly. However, any zoning changes we make have to align with the goals. So the transportation chapter has a goal to reduce future traffic congestion due to development. And one way that zoning could help with that is having a rule about businesses and having them share access between the businesses. So if you want to go to one business, the next business, you don't have to go out onto the street to get there. There's a little access way between the two. Just small, simple things like that. And I just want to make the point that I've heard people say the plan contradicts itself because it says, improve the economy in one chapter and protect natural resources in the other. But I think what you have to do is look at the plan as a whole, keep the vision in mind, and understand that the overall plan calls for a balance of development that fits in the community. So you really have to look at it holistically. Any questions about the comprehensive plan and how it relates to zoning? Must have done a great job. So now we're going to talk quickly about how am I doing? All right. Now that we know more about zoning, we're going to talk a little bit about this project to update our zoning. The project is going to update the rules that regulate how every property in the town is used. This should help shape our community well into the future. And the reason we're doing this, which did not print, but I have it on the screen. The reason we're doing this, well, there's several reasons. One, the last major overhaul of our town zoning was in 1989. So we need to incorporate the newest best practices in zoning and modern uses into our code. Two, the town adopted a new comprehensive plan in 2020, and as I said, New York State law says your zoning needs to be consistent with that. And then the last one. Finally, we need to improve, if you've ever used our code, we need to improve the clarity and the ease of use so it's easier for people to understand and use. So to get this project done, the town hired a consultant team. They're called ZoneCo and a subcontractor, Hardesty in Hanover. They're working closely with your town planning staff, and on top of that, the town convened a zoning update advisory committee, and there's at least one member here. Two members. There's Bruce in the back. He's also on the committee along with Kevin. And their job is to advise the town board and town planning staff on the process and the work of the consultant. And of course, the town board is very involved in this because they're ultimately the decision makers. Most important will be input from you, and that's why we're starting off here. Of course, the project has already begun, and right now we are in a stage that our consultant calls calibration. They also said that this stage is the meat and potatoes of the project because it is basically the assessment of our existing zoning regulations to see if there are changes necessary to achieve the goals in our comp plan. So the next step, so this is going on now, and we'll be incorporating your input into this effort. The next step is more participation. So once we have this calibration phase completed, I hope this winter into the early spring, then in the late spring and into the summer, we'll have another round of these kinds of workshops to look at the results. What are they proposing as consultants for our changes to the zoning? Finally, next on, they'll actually draft, they'll take that workshop work that we do, and they'll start drafting the actual zoning code and working on the zoning maps, so changing those maps to match what they're proposing. We'll have yet another round of these workshops once we have draft code, because that's really going to be, things on the ground, the zoning map, real changes to the code. And that we're expecting in the winter, spring of 2025. We're hoping we can wrap this whole thing up with the town board finalizing and adopting a new code and a new zoning map in the spring of 2025. So if you want to keep up to date on all of this, of course, your civic associations who are sponsoring these meetings are a good place to go, but also we have a website called Southold zoningupdate.com, which has all of this information we're talking about tonight, plus an opportunity to sign up to receive notifications, and we're hoping online opportunities for participation for people who can't get to these kinds of meetings. So, now's the fun part. Look, we're right on time. So, what we want to ask you to do next, and if you're not at a table, it'd be great if you could join a table. There's a couple empty seats. We're going to have breakout groups where you're going to discuss at your table, excuse me, a discussion about zoning and your priorities. So, in your handouts, you have a list of issues that are related to the comprehensive plan goals. If you don't have a handout, we'll bring them to you. Just raise your hand if you don't have a handout, and Caitlin will give you one.
We have a couple more here.
So the comprehensive plan has a lot of goals. It has many goals. They're all important, but we can't implement them all simultaneously. So one of the things we want out of this breakout group discussion is which issues out of the 12 on the front page are most important to address now. And just so you understand the handouts, the first page is a list of 12 issues. And you also get the opportunity to tell us if we missed something that should be on here. And then the second page actually gives you the ideas for zoning, so it talks more about how zoning connects to those issues. So you'll be talking about a couple things. One, the 5 issues out of the 12 that you believe are most important to address now, and also ideas beyond those on the detail sheet for how zoning could help us achieve those goals. So we'll do 20 minutes. If you need more time, we have time. So right now we'll go to 7:25.
Can I just interject?
Oh, please do.
So I've been planning town of Southold for like 22 years now, and what I'd like to do is just give you some of my thoughts. It seems like we're in a transition now in Southold. We have begun a transition where the character that everybody has so hard to work to preserve has been attracting, different types of uses and other things that we really haven't contemplated. That's why zoning is important. Think about the character and how you interact with Mattituck-Laurel. Think about what you would like your main streets to look like as far as uses. We can't think of everything. If there's new uses you've seen in other places, or if there's too many uses in certain places, like are there too many banks, people bank online a lot. So those types of things. And how you interact with these businesses, some roadways may have difficulty pulling out onto. There may not be pedestrian connectivity. So what this will translate into, all this zoning and this discussion, will be sort of design standards also, which is also in the comprehensive plan. And then we hope to link those to grants and funding to implement those strategies. But what's important about the way Southold was developed? Southold was developed on farming and fishing. Those were the two staples. Well, there was this pretty big brick maker, but they were out in Greenport. But Mattituck, if you look the way Mattituck was developed, most of our hamlet centers and industrial areas, and certainly in Southold, are against the railroad track. Once the railroad track was laid out to Southold, we started shipping cordwood, potatoes, certainly shellfish to the city, because that was, the commerce thing. It did cause some problems as far as sustainability with our resources, but now we're trying to bring that all back. So I think that, when you picture what will the town look in 50 to 100 years, really let us have it. Tell us all your ideas. No idea is a bad idea. We will research it, we will think on it, the town board will discuss it, and if you look at the sheet, a lot of character issues are on this sheet, and that's because character is visual. But you also gotta include your experiences, because you are the experts in Mattituck-Laurel. Your experiences matter, and we wanna hear those.
Thanks, Mark, that's excellent. So for each group, if you don't mind having someone record the main points you discuss, ask someone to do that, and then ask someone if they'd like to be the reporting back out, because we're hoping to have each table report back out what your main points were. But then you can see the same 12 issues are up here in big paper. So at the end of the 20-minute discussion, we're going to ask you to individually choose your own 5 top items. We each have 5 stickers, and you put a sticker on the 5 top items. And again, they're all important, so it's not that they're not, some are more important than others, it's more we want to know what's top of mind for you, so we know what things to tackle right away. And that'll give us a visual. Once we're done with the stickers, we'll regroup, and we'll have each group report back out to talk about their discussion. So have at it. We'll let you know when time is up. There's a couple of seats at other tables. But with the stickers, I just want you to take your 5 stickers, come up here, and put a sticker under the 5 things that you personally feel are the things we need to tackle now. What's top of mind for you, basically. There's no right or wrong answer. All of these are important. They'll all be addressed. If you don't have stickers, come on up, we'll have some up here. You got 10 minutes for this. You could also take a moment to go look at those zoning maps. Okay, everybody, looks like we're done with this. So I think we can reconvene, take a look at the results.
Okay.
But I'd love to hear your tables results and how they compare to
Well, I'm living there.
So which table would like to go first, reporting out? Or do I need to pick?
Go ahead.
This table in front.
Go ahead.
And some of the things I want to know in reporting out.
Do you want my notes? Jim Phillips? Oh, thank you, Jim.
So, if you can all see the stickers, looks like water quality is a big winner. Drinking water, housing, farming, improving regulations for things like hotels and other intense uses, that's a big one. And I'm just gonna reiterate that these are all important. So we're really just trying to understand what things are most important to you right now. So I'd love to hear from the tables to see sort of how it matches up with this. Did you find consensus on what the top 5 are? How does it compare with this? Did you have any ideas about zoning?
Well, we had some disagreement. One elected official at our table kept saying, well, that's too late, that's too late, that's too late. But the rest of us didn't quite feel the same way. In particular, the one on traffic, which was #1 here, but we didn't necessarily have a group consensus there. But from our group, I would say sea level rise was a big one. We combined drinking water and the water quality. In terms of the farming, one of the issues that comes up is You know, we hear it all the time that the farmers need to survive, and, well, I guess what we're looking for is a distinction as to what is agritainment. That word seems to get stretched an awful lot, not just here, but certainly we're seeing the same thing happening in Riverhead right now. But would like some clarity on that. Probably the top would be housing. And it's tough to pick anyone. Light pollution, anybody else? Am I missing something? Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
How about this table? How about this table?
Sure. I think the first one, improvement of traffic congestion and safety, and how that ties in sort of with the walkability and pedestrian safety. Not necessarily just in hamlet centers, but in general. The next was affordable/community housing, and what zones can, how we could sort of figure out how to readapt certain zones, not necessarily change zones themselves, but readapt different zones for different purposes, and certainly affordable or community housing can be a part of that. Farming as a viable business, how do you retain the look and feel of what the community looks like, and what attracts people out here is that look and feel of open spaces and agriculture and that sort of farming community feel. But as you attract more people, it makes that a less viable option for people to actually do for a living. How can you work with preservation of land and their different restrictions and still make it easy enough for people to have a viable business? And I think it was sort of covered in this little breakout discussion details. How do we allow for more value-added product and processing on land that is protected or has easements or easements over them that make that not possible at the moment. The increased protection of woodlands and trees, I think we sort of thought that goes hand in hand with farming. It's more of a symbiotic relationship than most people realize, so it's just as important to our community to protect farmland and as it is the woodlands and the trees. And the one thing we didn't see on here, and maybe this is sort of hotels and other intense uses, is the subdivision of land / subdivisions themselves. And how do we sort of, not necessarily guard against that, but how do we make sure that that's done in a responsible manner?
Great, thank you. Good. We'll go to the people.
I'll take a stab and you can join me if you disagree. I think there was a general consensus at this table on farming, protecting water quality and drinking water, and protecting woodlands. I think there was a kind of a consensus on that. We had, at least a couple of us, a spirited discussion about on housing and hotels and other uses, whether that needs to be done thoughtfully or just put a stop to, more of it, because more of it's just gonna make it worse here. So that's something to think about, and hotels in particular, whether we should be thoughtful about it or just not want hotels out here. So we had.
Anything else?
No, I'm done. You can have.
One thing's there was consensus on some things, not on other things, like housing, affordable housing. But one thing that I think we recognize, to speak to your point and expand on it, is just that it's very hard to pick 5 things because they really are enmeshed. They're really overlapping, and traffic congestion and safety definitely has to do with pedestrian safety and walkability, and water, the water table, and drinkable water versus water quality, and the rising sea levels. I mean, there's so much is overlapping. The protecting the farms and the community character also goes with hotels and wanting to make sure that they're, kept in a way that still fits in, if we're gonna have more that fit in a way that seems like the rest of the character of the rest of the place. So it's very hard to sort of undo the web, you know?
Yes,
Because
well,
it
I
really
think
is a
that's a
web.
wonderful result that you're making all those connections, because I think that's even better than picking 5 things, honestly.
That's what we thought.
Okay, good. Anything else? Good. Okay, the next table, up there.
Oh, I would so much you to do this.
No, I'm not
You're
a
really
public
good.
speaker.
All right, I'll open my big mouth, okay. All right, some things we agreed on, some things we didn't. I think for the most part, I say everybody else, we really improved traffic congestion, safety was paramount, and improving the walkability, as this gentleman said here, they're pretty much kind of like commingled together, like, you know, having pedestrian malls like on Love Lane or something like that. The next big thing I think everybody talked about was affordable housing. That's key. That has to happen because people to service businesses out here, they need a place to live. And if you're gonna have a business, you need people to can afford to work your business, but they need to live in the community and not 5 hours away. The hotels and other intense uses, don't get me going about the indoor water park up on the main road, because obviously not a fan of that. The farming, and again, that I think that also goes hand in glove with the increased protection of the woodlands and trees, but farming is a viable business and keeping the community character. I mean, in the 40 small years that I've been here, I've seen this place change so drastically that it makes you want to cry at times. And I'd like to be able to maintain, you know, for future generations, what we've all come out here to know and love. And the water I mean, again, I mean, I'm not a big, like I said, I'm not a big person about global warming, so don't get me going on that one. But I would say that building homes on the shoreline really needs to be looked at. If you're gonna build a house and then have it fall into the Peconic Bay or into the Sound, you shouldn't be building a house up there. Mother Nature's gonna take care of that. So that needs to be looked into. But for the most part, I think we all pretty much agree that we know and love this place out here, and we want it to maintain the character that it's had, but also people coming out here to enjoy it. We want them to come out here to enjoy it, but they also now have to turn around and like have some compassion for us, because we live here, and I don't feel like being a fish in a fish tank, being looked at and, oh, look at this, and it's just the traffic on where I live on Peconic Bay Boulevard is absolutely overwhelming come the summertime. It's impossible, you can't hear yourself think. So again, that's to improve traffic, congestion, etc. But, and you did down here put other issues. I think that noise pollution is something that really should be added to this pot here. We did a good job with the helicopters flying over. Oh, yeah, that
But the Lear jets, they're still swooping in. But the noise pollution from the motorcycles, someone's got to do something about that. So
Great,
that's all I
thank
have
you.
to say.
Next table.
Go for it. Very good. You're up this time. I did it last time.
Do it again.
This table, we thought outside the box. We talked a lot. We talked about the basic unfairness of, for a lot of people that live here who have to go from one place to another, and the fact that the traffic builds up, and in some cases, a 15-minute commute gets to be an hour and a half. You mentioned that as well. We pretty much agreed that, like everybody else has said, that giving us 5 buttons forced a little bit of unreality. If I look up there at the way people voted, there are some obvious real discontinuities. I think there needs to be a lot more thinking about the relationship. It's not me at the table here. The relationship between each one of these 12, it almost comes out as if it's a 3-dimensional problem. Maybe 4-dimensional if you add, again, commuting times and so on. And dealing with two dimensions is good as a start, but the interrelationships among these 12, which may in fact just be the tip of the iceberg, this is a very, very complex problem. And we all know this, otherwise we wouldn't be sitting here. On the plus side, I think exercises like this are absolutely essential, and it would be terrific if the next time around we were given the results of, let's accept what's up there and go to the next step. There needs to be some analysis done of what came out of this, and I think the people here and everybody else should know what the results are and what it means. That's pretty much it.
Very good.
My favorite, because I'm with the Historical Society with Charlie and a few other people, we sort of take preservation for granted, and by taking it for granted, it pretty much gets ignored. And it's not just preservation of farmland, which of course is dominant and important, but preservation, when people talk about character, we've got houses in Mattituck-Laurel that go back, in fact, the Historical Society houses, the mid-1850s, got a lot of houses like that. We need to preserve those and get some benefit out of that. Charlie's working on that. Anyway, I'll shut up. I think this is a great exercise. Let's do more of it.
Thank you very much. Last table in the corner there.
Joe?
Under duress. We kind of went off on a bunch of tangents, but one of the things, I mean, I'm glad Heather said that, it wasn't like these were trying to prioritize these, because they're all important. But one of the things is, that we did talk about is how they're all interrelated in some way. If you do something under one of these topics, it's going to affect something under the other topics. And that's something that I think a little more thought needs to be given to. The other thing, we talked a little bit about light pollution, which personally to me is not if you were to prioritize these, it's not towards the top of the list, and I think that shows up on the wall there as well. But one of the things about light pollution is the fact that the existing zoning code may be adequate, but it's an enforcement issue. And that's, I'm not sure how a change in the zoning code could meaningfully change the current situation. When we talked about historic preservation, and I brought up the issue of the fact, just as an aside, that town of Southold is not a certified local government, although the village of Greenport is, and becoming a certified local government would give the town considerably greater authority over projects that have the potential to impact historic properties.
Writing that down. Great. Anything else?
I think that was good.
Thank you. On the last table.
One more.
We have one.
Oh, wait, one more, I'm sorry. One more from that.
In talking about economic development, which was really not a topic here, but the idea that, to the extent possible, we should attempt to make sure that the economic development is for year-round jobs and year-round businesses, as opposed to just seasonal.
And benefit the community.
Benefit the community, and should benefit the year-round community.
And we also talked about the very strong relationship between a lack of affordable housing and our traffic issues.
Yes.
Good, that's good, thank you.
Okay, many of the topics, we said the same thing, so I won't spend too much time on that. We started with what matters mostly to Mattituck, and then we branched out. And some of the issues were community character, having industrial and businesses on the roads, or having something that would not, in the corridor, give you an eyesore, like we discussed some of the things that really stood out and said, oh, what is it, kind of feeling. The traffic and the safety, we touched on that as important, the hotels, and many people mentioned that. And then we also, one of the people here mentioned he would rather have a balanced wildlife, you know, in other words, you know, the deer problem and what, you know, we have to balance, not that we're anti-deer, but work something out. Then we talked about housing, especially accessory apartments and how to go through somebody renting their accessory apartment as opposed to having affordable housing in the town hamlet center, you know, and then we discussed that, the ability to walk around in the town, how good that would be for people and having the bus available, and then having an accessory apartment outside where you'd need a car, or, you know, transportation in general. And then we weren't sure, well, I wasn't sure about who you rented to, and there's a list, I understand, which I wasn't aware of, but I think if somebody has an accessory apartment, even if they're renting it or letting their family live there, they should have access to some kind of a, you know, the registry that you had mentioned. And this way, you know, they don't, like anybody, you don't know who's gonna come in, you know, so you're leery and you don't wanna make that step. But maybe if you encourage people who have accessory apartments or are thinking of transforming it into an accessory, you know, the garage or something, that they have more information on this registry. And, you know, it could be a nurse, a teacher, you know, maybe they have an interview or something like that. Go along those lines, as well as have the ability in the town center. You know, that's about it. I mean, you know, I agree with the historical, that's our character. So, you know, that's it.
Well, this has been so exciting for me to see so many people come out and have such great ideas. You know, the next round of this, and I will take your advice, I'm not sure of your name, but to try to analyze this and come up with results. We're gonna do this in each hamlet. And then the next round, which we're expecting in early summer, of these meetings, that's gonna be some real meat and potato stuff. You're gonna have some real stuff to tackle, because it'll be the actual recommendations for the zoning changes, which, you know, we'll definitely pass on all this information to our consultant, and Mark and I will be working with them on it. So that concludes today. I'm really happy you're here. And any questions?
I was surprised, and I don't know what's going on, but I thought, you know, we would address the size of houses. Because I think that's a really big issue.
Okay.
And like on how much land, because that like is really changing, you know, the way our town is looked.
Right, so house sizes definitely, we do have a house size law, but we need, it's pretty new, so we need to analyze whether it's working. So that's a really good point you make, and we'll be hopefully doing that as we go through this update to see if the rules need to be adjusted to work as intended.
Just a question, to what extent, as you're considering zoning issues, are you also, you may have touched on this a little earlier, and apologies because we had to be late. Do you work in tandem with people, for example, dealing with public transportation, or, you know, things that are ancillary to it that have to be taken into consideration given whatever zoning changes and you know, issues you choose to tackle?
When you say working, I mean,
you know, in discussions with, like, if we do this, it's actually gonna also impact, the example I'm using is public transit, because that's, you know, such a critical, if you change things in zoning and don't also have, you know, the correct changes happening in public transit, things are gonna go awry.
Right. So those agencies, we definitely are in touch with them and talking with them. They're, how to describe it, slow moving and difficult to change. You have the Suffolk County Transit for the bus and the LIRR and the MTA for the train. So, but we definitely have that, like I said, all of these are important, so yes, we would be trying to work with them to improve service always and have that in mind as we go through this. Yes, Bruce?
Can the results get posted on the website?
Yes, we can do that. It might take us a little time. We have a bunch of these meetings coming up, but eventually we'll get this all online.
We're probably not the only community, you know, wrestling with these issues. I'm curious if there's a, you know, national working group on, you know, rural zoning, or if you're looking at other, like, looking at Southampton and East Hampton about what not to do.
Well, as a professional planner, you know, we do talk with our, you know, our colleagues in the other towns on the East End. We have conferences that we talk about. Our zoning consultant has done exactly what they're doing for us all over the country. So yes, we definitely are pulling in experiences from other places. Any other questions? Well, thank you so much for coming. I hope to see you again.